with our business partners here along Main Street, so we're really excited that Storm agreed to come to a program about tattoo art. He's a good neighbor across the street. I'm just enjoying the time over with him. He has a store, Art on You, across the street. Make sure you listen.
Thank you. Before we start, I'm going to ask that everyone please hold all comments, questions, that sort of thing until the very end. First, my name is Storm, and I'd like to welcome you to Talk Inc. Tonight, I'll be discussing a brief history of tattooing, the American tattoo industry, American cultural relevance of tattoos, and a summary of how one becomes an artist and the importance of getting a good professional tattoo. First, what qualifies me for this lecture? I'm what I would call a born artist, which means I possess an innate desire to create and manifest visions from my imagination since I can remember. After completing what I felt was necessary for my fine arts major at Idaho State University, which did include my final thesis project consisting of a well-composed artist statement and a senior gallery exhibit, I moved from Pocatello, Idaho to Salt Lake City. Here, I met my wife, Renee. We married on October 31st, 2003, and she was the one who first encouraged me to get into the trade. When I was discouraged from a number of local shops, I worked tirelessly as a parking lot striper, as well as working graveyards as a power washer. In fact, I can still have nightmares here and there downtown at the Gateway Summer and Winter garages when I go in there. An evening bartender and server, and on the side, if there could be a side, I was doing eBay. Combine that with funding from my parents, I was able to go to the world's only tattoo school in Detroit, Michigan. And I gotta tell you folks, $1,000 and countless hours away from my family and a 2-week course, yeah, I say a 2-week course. Later, I thought I was ready to sling ink. Instead, after a few months, the harsh reality set in that I was going to need an apprenticeship. It was a costly way for me to get my foot in the door, but it was enough for my mentor Knox at Attitude Tattoo to give me the opportunity that I sought. At Attitude, I labored as an apprentice, became an artist, and eventually managed the shop. So, for over the past 7.5 years, I've been tattooing professionally. Prior to that, Art on You Studios was my baby. I developed it several years ago as a means to market my various artworks in a variety of mediums, from the classic 2-dimensional canvas to my horror dolls. While I was working at Attitude Tattoo, I developed a strong online presence with Art on You Studios as a dedicated home site, a MySpace venue that garnered over 70,000 friends, and a Facebook profile. Then it came time to spread my wings. On October 17th, 2009, my wife and I started Art on You Studios, which is now currently across the street. Sure, that's mine. It's now currently across the street here on historic Magna, Maine. That's the Enigma. The Enigma we met at a Boise convention. He's an awesome guy, and yes, those puzzle pieces are countless and over the vast majority of his body. It was our brick and mortar location across the street that's Art on You Studios, and I was no longer a one-man show. Since that time, we've led our team to double in size, triple the staff, and quadruple our clientele. So far annually, we've hosted a major charity event, have made news in multiple media outlets, from Fox 13 to the Tribune to independent publications. Our online presence has now extended to also include Twitter, Google+, and Tumblr. This is one of our most recent slides from a photo shoot that we had done earlier last year. That's in front of our shop that's now across the street, sort of kitty-cornered here. And among our media, we hung out with Big Buddha. Right after we first opened, Big Buddha came out and did the morning show in our shop and the Kiwi Bakery next door. So, now to get a little bit of background of me, let's go back in time. How old is tattooing? Well, while marking our flesh permanently, in some fashion, many not date back as far as the imagery on the caves of Lascaux. Most historians and archaeologists agree that tattooing has existed in its earliest forms for approximately 10,000 years. We also know that the oldest human found on a mountain between Austria and Italy in 1991, who has been named Otzi the Iceman, is 5,000 years old and possessed some 57 tattoos that were made by cutting the skin and rubbing ash into these intentional wounds. So, for those of you who might be devout Christians and follow the Bible to the letter, the Garden of Eden is 5,000 years old. This means that tattooing predates Adam and Eve. There's some food for thought. Egypt was another area which tattooing existed. Several 2,000-year-old mummies have been found in Egypt with tattoos. Researchers have not been able to determine the exact reason for these markings, but we know that it was not uncommon, nor did it hold negative connotations. It is believed that a lot of these mummies that were tattooed, that were female, accompanied their dead counterparts and helped to guide them into the afterlife, where Anubis would greet them and they went on. Ancient Rome, another area where tattooing did exist. But initially in ancient Rome, tattoos were abhorred, as the body was considered a vessel with potential to reach perfection during one's lifetime. And we can see this portrayed in its sculpture, in frescoes. They were absent of any sort of markings on the body, as they viewed that a godlike form didn't have this. In fact, criminals were tattooed as a form of punishment. They used that to mark them, and that way people knew who the menaces to society were. Later, however, as the empire expanded, Roman soldiers encountered other warriors who bore tattoos as a badge of honor. Roman soldiers encountered other warriors who bore these tattoos and noticed that they would help to strike fear in the hearts of their enemies. They also would have them for the similar reasons that we might have our military personnel have patches or medals today. It would signify that they had an achievement. Julius Caesar noted these identifying features in his journals. And Roman soldiers, in turn, began to tattoo themselves in a similar fashion. Alan Governor, author of Stony Knows How, Life as a Tattoo Artist, says, "The presence of tattooing among Roman legionnaires perhaps point at one of the most pursued, the tattoo even, the most ancient of mysteries, relating to tattooing. Which is to say that the individual has always pursued the tattoo, even if it runs counter to the beliefs and values of the society in which he or she may exist." Soon after this period, Roman society had a demand for tattoos, and tattooers began to spring up. Interestingly, however, it was the doctors that first began to do the practice, as many of their instruments could double as a tattooing device. In 325 Common Era, the religious zealot and Emperor Constantine took the throne in Rome, and the once polytheistic society became the Holy Roman Empire. Christianity would soon overtake the Western world, and tattooing would all but disappear from this area for centuries. But meanwhile, in other parts of the world, the tattoo continued to flourish. Japan was among those cultures that continued the practice of tattooing. That's Constantine, by the way. That statue still exists in Rome. The merchant class Japanese began to tattoo suits as a means of personal expression until a repressive law came into being in the 19th century which outlawed tattoos. Before that, a lot of the Japanese felt that this was a way to express themselves. They would create entire bodysuits that extended all over their bodies. So, when this law that made it repressive had existed in the 19th century, it sort of went underground. This underground practice, you sort of had to know a friend of a friend to be able to get tattooed. When they did, they began to do the bodysuits. Bodysuits would extend underneath their normal apparel, and it was sort of this hidden treasure, this occult thing that existed that was special to them, and of course very appealing. It was most appealing to the Yakuza, which could be comparable to the Italian mafia, but this was Japanese criminals that were highly skilled and also had the practice of tattooing over their entire bodies. These bodysuits would be acquired over a lifetime that would tell stories of their lives, of their culture, and their experience with the Yakuza. Generations later, absent the repressive laws, the tattoos evolved into a respected art form, where the collectors may spend lifetimes, as we noted previously, collecting pieces that combine into one cohesive story spanning the entire body. Unlike today, they would generally start with one piece and simply evolve it from there. Traditional Japanese tattoos are still among some of the most popular today in the US. Among other cultures that have been tattooing for hundreds, perhaps even thousands of years, are the Pacific Islanders. Most anthropologists believe that the etymology of the word tattoo is rooted in the Pacific Islands. In 1769, explorer James Cook brought the word into the English language when he returned from his journey from Tahiti. Tahitians call the tattoo process tatau. Now tatau was done with wooden staffs. And what they commonly do is they take one of the staffs and they would embed into it sharp pieces that were commonly found in nature, such as bird bones, perhaps turtle shells, and sometimes even shark teeth. They would embed it into one end, then they take the other wooden staff and they tap on it, tatau, 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 and that's the sound that it made. And that's what they reflected when they decided to call it tatau. And that's where our modern word tattooing comes from. Tattoos in the Pacific Islands are largely symbolic. Hawaiian natives, for example, will place 3 dots on their tongue when mourning. While some were for decorative purposes, most were for a number of reasons, signifying warriors to rites of passage, and variations would exist from tribe to tribe and locations on the island. Most of the markings that are on the skins of the Polynesians, Samoans, etc., they clearly define where they belonged as far as their family heritage, the location on the island. It might even reflect their accomplishments or even their various trades and interests. And to this day, that is still the practice you can find in true traditional Samoan or Polynesian tattooing. Prior to Captain Cook's voyages, tattoos in the Western culture had come to be viewed as savage and uncouth. This was until James Cook introduced to England the Polynesian Omai, who is pictured here, who wore traditional facial tattoos. These are Maori designs. And he came to be well respected in the English community. In his own right, he was regal, he was royal, and people loved him. So this, of course, inspires the English community of that time, especially your upperclassmen, to want to begin tattooing one another. Now, the difference in the English community was that these upperclassmen wanted to tattoo things that reflected their own culture, their own personal interests. So it was more common for them to be tattooed with royal iconography or dragons, things of that nature. Now, if we fast forward just a little bit into the American Industrial Age, which from here forward, I'm going to focus on the American tattoo, we have an interest in tattooing. But tattooing, for us Americans, is going to be a little bit slow if we're going to be tapping that stuff in. We want something that's going to be a little bit more advanced, and that's where Thomas Edison came into play. Thomas Edison was initially creating a device to duplicate documents. So he created what was called the stencil pen. That was the official name of what he trademarked. The stencil pen, however, like so many other devices that Edison created, was flawed. And that's where Samuel O'Reilly comes in. Samuel O'Reilly took that device and he had an aha moment in 1891 when he figured a way to modify and patent it into the modern electric tattoo machine, which you see here. This is why after O'Reilly's inventions, signs outside tattoo shops would be subtitled "Modern Electric Tattooing." because it was. This was now able to reduce the amount of tattooing that you could do into a significantly less amount of time, cover more space, and would be far less painful to the individual who was receiving the tattoos. So, it wasn't long before tattoo shops were beginning to spring up coast to coast. Among those who embraced the tattoo form in our culture were the circuses and sideshows. Tattooed freaks, as they became known, were huge attractions. And these entertainment galleries, during the course of the 1920s, we could find that there were more than 300 full-body tattooed individuals that were employed by circuses, carnivals, and sideshows in the United States. The tattooed performers could be paid up to $200 per week, which during the 1920s was a considerable sum of money. No surprise, the tattooed ladies, such as this one here, were often considered exotic and erotic. Again, if we look at today, you can see this is still the same thought process. Lover, hater, Kat Von D is seen the same way. So is Megan Massacre, who is now on New York Inc. We look at her and we think, Tattoos have become even more popular at the end of the Second World War, when numerous sailors came home with body artworks from around the world. And they continue to add patriotic skin pictures from the growing shops here in the US. In fact, during that time period, when they came home, especially at the end of World War II, you can find documentation, photographs of tattoo shops where lines quite literally extended out the tattoo shops and down the block because tattoo artists were limited. And the number of sailors returning home were huge. Another interesting point during this time period, tattoo artists, because they didn't have the contemporary knowledge of bloodborne pathogens, cross-contaminations. In fact, they didn't use examination gloves the way we do now. They were gloveless. So, what they did when you came in, and here's another point, needle making was very difficult. You only had yourself, and perhaps at best an apprentice could help you with needle making. They couldn't mass produce it the way we can today. So you would take a needle, and after you finish a tattoo, you would reach over to your bleach bucket on the side, a little toothbrush, and you would scrub out the excess skin and ink, shake it off, put it back in your machine, you're ready to tattoo. I also know it's gloveless. Well, since you have a long line at the door and you got to get through these guys really fast, what they would do is they'd create a stop right here at the webbing in between their pointer finger and their thumb, and they'd whiz those lines right up into their thumb. So the old timers that are still alive today, if you notice, they will have a black area right here from whizzing those things right into their hands. Those of you that are contemplating this, you're absolutely correct. You're reusing ink, you're reusing needles. You can only imagine if you were number 52 in line, whose blood is going into yours, including the artists. Something else to think about where we've come. It's sort of like when the doctors used to smoke while they were examining you. In the 1960s, it was revolutionaries like Lyle Tuttle and Don Ed Hardy who featured the popularity of tattoo art among Americans. Ed Hardy was a student of this individual here, the legendary sailor Jerry Collins. He also studied under Japanese master tattooist Horihide. Hardy's new concepts, which combined traditional American designs with traditional Japanese designs, as well as his cutting-edge approach to color blending on the flesh, was applauded by fellow artists all across the country. In the late 70s, when tattoo conventions first started, Ed Hardy got up in the front of the room, and people were wowed by what he was doing with color blending, what he was doing with designs. Prior to that, it was Sailor Jerry who had set the standard. No one had seen what could be done, and they thought it was impossible. Here's Ed Hardy, and he's doing it. A lot of you probably only know Ed Hardy from what he does on t-shirts, from what he's done on other things that are marketed out there, shot glasses, hats, posters, that sort of thing. A lot of them have a lot of bling that have been added to them. But initially, they were revolutionary in the industry, and that's what those of us that are in the industry most well respect Mr. Ed Hardy for. what he did to further evolve the industry during the 70s. Another individual, Lyle Tuttle. Janis Joplin was tattooed by Lyle Tuttle in San Francisco in 1969. She got a little flower on her wrist. Subsequently, after she received that little flower on her wrist, Lyle tattooed other celebrities like Cher, Peter Fonda, and for those of you who know who Peter Fonda is, Ghost Rider 1, he was the devil, and Paul Stanley. If you don't know who Paul Stanley is, ask your parents. What I appreciate most about Lyle Tuttle myself is that he was the first in our industry to gain notoriety and has become famous for his shameless self-promotion. But the industry, well, it hasn't always embraced that sort of mentality, and the old schoolers perceive these actions to be disdained. For example, when Lyle Tuttle made the cover of Rolling Stone magazine in 1970, sailor Jerry Collins put that picture in the toilet. Was not real happy about that. Now you combine the rising popularity of tattooing among celebrities in the early 70s with women's liberation, and the multi-millennial folk art transcends again. Lyle Tuttle said in regards to this, women's liberation, 100% women's liberation. That put tattooing back on the map. With women getting a newfound freedom, they could get tattooed if they so desired. It increased and opened the market by 50% of the population. Hell, of the human race. For 3 years, I tattooed almost nothing but women. Women made tattooing a softer and kinder art form. And that's still true. I would say that a lot of my clients, if not the majority of my clients, are female. And it's for the same reasons. It's liberating. Unfortunately, this increasing trend would hit a major bump in the 80s. By the way, this is us with Lyle Tuttle. This was at the Boise Convention, same night we met the Enigma. We got to meet the great Lyle Tuttle, and he really is just that cool. When AIDS and HIV became prevalent in the 80s, bloodborne pathogens became a part of the awareness people had when it came to tattoos, and large numbers of possible enthusiasts shied away from the body modification. As the 80s progressed, so did the precautions taken by professional shops as they implemented standards that included examination gloves, one-time use ink cups, needles, and sterilization procedures. The American tattoo industry in the 90s changes again. With professional athletes like Dennis Rodman, for better or worse, to millions of young fans. By no means am I saying that Rodman is the only tattooed professional athlete in the limelight during that period, or even today. But this has a profound influence on not only young people, but especially among African American and Latino young males. What it did was it helped to open up the door to an entirely new market that had been untapped. African American young males, and Latino young males especially, realized, wow, I can be tattooed and it's socially acceptable. Look at my favorite athletes are out there. You know, these people are getting paid millions of dollars and are considered role models. If they have tattoos, why couldn't I? And that became huge in our industry. As we move forward into the 21st century, we see that tattoo collectors and enthusiasts are beginning to expand, while simultaneously we see a much broader social acceptance. This is due to the many baby boomers reaching retirement, and as Gen Xers begin to take the helms of countless businesses, company policies are redefined to include non-offensive visible tattoos. So tattoos are not only for the select subcultural groups, but they become fashionable. And also another interesting point here to bring up are the business folks. Business folks can obviously afford tattoos, and they can afford a lot of tattooing. So you're going to start seeing attorneys, doctors, and other people in authoritative positions in the corporate world that begin to get tattoos. Here's a side note for you. In the tattoo industry, we have terms for covering, say, an entire arm. If you're up here just on the face of the arm, and I'm the shoulder around to my elbow, that'd be a quarter sleeve. If I bring that tattoo wrapping all the way around from my shoulder down to my elbow, that is now a half sleeve. If I take that all the way down to my wrist, that's a full sleeve. If I am merely from my wrist to my elbow wrapping around, that's called a gauntlet, that is so named after the piece of armor that is also called a gauntlet. Now, once we start getting to this era and we have the business folks that are getting tattooed, they can't have that necessarily showing off. So of course they couldn't have hand tattoos or neck tattoos, but they could have business sleeves. Business sleeves would cut off down here. So it comes all the way down to right here. That way, if they want to roll their sleeves up to get serious while on the job, it still hides underneath. And it has that same element that the Yakuza once had when they were having those full body suits that couldn't be seen by the whole public. It's like they have this sort of alternate life, this sort of occult, this sort of secretive, hidden thing that's beneath their clothes that allows them to have that other personality to express themselves. In an interview in the textbook Modern Primitives, Dr. Anton LaVey said of tattooing, "But now tattooing is much more of a solitary choice. The person who proclaims, 'I have this particular symbol on me,' is trying to say, 'You should recognize it because it's important to me.'" Now, that's not necessarily something that's universally understood. It could be much more esoteric. By no means was the doctor proclaiming that most people get tattooed for such deep reasons. However, many individuals do place great meaning on their colorful modifications. And that's what I was saying, is that yes, we have these business folks that are getting these tattoos underneath their clothing, and they have these hidden meanings, this hidden world. And let's face it, there are a lot of geeky tattoos that I've done out there. I've done pi symbols. I've done mathematical equations. I've even seen molecular structures have been tattooed on people. So they can have lots of hugely deep and geeky meanings. But does that mean that everyone's getting that sort of thing? Well, no. Quite frankly, I tattoo a lot of stupid shit too. But that's only my opinion. That's not to say that it is actually stupid. You know, it's what you want to tattoo on yourself, and you see them out there too. I'm sure you've probably seen one of the latest fads, the camel on the big toe. Right? We have other people that have done the lawnmower one where it's shaving up a track and a hairline somewhere on the body. These are all tattoos that may not have a deep meaning. And lots of times people just like it because they're aesthetically pleasing. In our melting pot culture, especially with those between 18 to 40, we notice that the body art carries with it significant relevance. Making oneself can exclaim an association with a particular street gang, a modern rite of passage, which by adults exercise their newly acquired legal right to be tattooed. I'm 18 now, so I'm going to get tattooed because I can. Or perhaps they are doing it as a rebellious statement against the establishment, like the punk rockers. It's a way of them basically throwing their middle finger up to corporate America. It's a rebellious thing. Or perhaps it's a way to pay tribute to loved ones, living or deceased. Anything from the baby footprints to perhaps a memorial to a grandparent. I myself have the classic mom and dad on my leg. So it could be that. Or maybe someone who influenced you. I've seen lots of Dali tattoos, which I can certainly appreciate. Or maybe you have other figures and other ways that you want to pay tribute to someone on your body. Or, as I noted, maybe it's just something that's for the sake of art. It's aesthetically wonderful in your own eyes. It is truly art. And these throngs of American enthusiasts are being catered to and featured in a variety of ways that continue to further evolve within our culture. Special interest periodicals dedicated to the tattooed now have several publications, including such titles as Tattoo Society, Flash, Skin and Ink, Inked, Urban Ink, Tattoo Artist, Prick Magazine, and these are just a few of the titles that are out there. Annual tattoo conventions from coast to coast showcasing artists and shops and reality television shows like Miami Ink, Inked, Tattoo Highway, New York Ink, London Ink, Ink Master, and Best Ink are all out there. And they're catering not only to the enthusiasts, but to those who are just simply curious. Lots of people are just curious, just like they were when you wanted to go see the tattoo freaks at the circuses. I'll bet there's some people in this room, they're not necessarily enthusiasts or even want a tattoo, but they're just curious about the tattoo freak who's speaking at the front of the room tonight. It's true. And that's why you're glued to your television sets to also see what's going on in the tattoo world, and it's growing every day. In fact, Today we see these canvases that are out there that hold true works of art that could be, in many cases, displayed in high and lowbrow galleries alongside other accomplished artists. That's why I refer to my clients as collectors, and I refer to their bodies as flesh galleries. So when my clients or collectors come in, I let them know that what they want on their bodies is up to them because it is a flesh gallery, and that's how they should display it. So, how are these countless pieces, such as the one up here, rendered today? I'd like to note that that piece up there is by Mike DeVries. To many in the industry, he's considered a master. You can see that there's a lot of color laying that's gone on here. Great contrast. That looks practically photoreal. But this is not always the case out there. I think many of us, if not all of us in this room, have also seen tattoos that are not so well done. They don't have the nice soft blending. They don't have straight lines. They have shapes in them. Some of them are even scarred. These are made by what we call scratchers. Scratchers is a derogatory term that we've applied to those people that are doing it on their homes, doing it in garages, doing it who knows where, under who knows what kind of conditions, and the outcome is horrible every time. And we fix these things regularly. They use what they call tattoo guns. Now this, to lots of people don't know, the gun is actually a ghetto term that was applied from those people that didn't know any better. What we use are machines. And that's a big difference. To those who have been regularly coming to us, my collectors, the enthusiasts that I know and associate with, I do let them know that the proper term is machine, and they can pass that on. So when you hear someone say gun in the future, you can correct them and say, no, it's not a tattoo gun, it's a tattoo machine. There's a common adage that's now going across the industry: guns kill, machines create. Something for you to think about. This is a tattoo machine. Tattoo machines in the professional industry are used in the coil process. We have a power unit. Our power unit distributes the power and allows us to adjust the amount of voltage that is going to travel through a clip cord up to our machine. When it gets to the machine, there's a circuit that's completed in the machine. It will travel through the coils, through the armature bar, up to a contact screw and back. The coils, when the electricity travels through the coils, creates a magnetic pulse, which pulls down the armature bar away from the contact screw. Now, of course, if it's away from the contact screw, there's no longer electricity, so the magnetic pulse is going to release. The spring on the back end of the armature bar is going to have it come back up into the contact screw, and it's going to continue over and over. It's going to bounce. It goes fairly rapidly. In fact, it's about 7 times per second. For those of you who just did the quick math in your head, that's 420 times per minute. The number is merely coincidental. It has absolutely no association whatsoever with the silly marijuana connotations. It has nothing to do with it. It's just merely coincidence. Yeah, it's about 420 times per minute that those needles are going across the flesh. The needles that we use are in 2 major configurations. We talked about the electric pen earlier that Edison and eventually Samuel Riley had taken. And I like to use electric pen as an analogy when I describe how the tattoo process works to my clients and collectors. The electric pen, or the liner needle, is what I use to create the foundation of the tattoo, the outline, or any other artist would use. And when it goes on the skin, it looks just like you're drawing on the skin, and you create the outline. Then we'll move on to another set of needles that are sort of stacked, like so. Those needles are a mag needle. I usually call it the electric paintbrush because I can use it in a similar fashion the way I would if I was painting on the traditional canvas. I can blend the colors. I can begin to make those soft shades that pull out into nothingness, into flesh tones. Those are your mag needles. When you do decide to go out and get tattoos, explore shops. Explore them. Lots of shops anymore have various themes, various decor that they have that reflect the personalities therein. Some shops specialize in traditional tattooing, and you'll see a lot of traditional artwork up there. Some of them want to take on a Japanese theme. You'll see lots of Japanese artwork. Our shop, given that my wife and I are huge horror fanatics, we have a shop that maintains a year-round horror and Halloween decor inside. Not to say that we specialize only in dark artwork, it just happens to be the theme of choice to make it interesting and a unique atmosphere to be tattooed in. When you go inside, check out the portfolios. This is important. Don't just go in and decide, well, all I really care about is a price. The price should be one of the last things that you're concerned about when you're talking about making a permanent body modification. Something that should, quite rightfully, be a work of art on your flesh gallery. Take the time to look at those portfolios and determine which artist is going to best suit you and the design that you want to have on your body. Ask your artist of choice questions pertinent to your tattoo. Things that we've already been talking about tonight. Make sure that they have sterile equipment, that their needles are one-time use, that their ink cups are all one-time use. Make sure that they have licensing up on their wall. Check to see if they have bloodborne pathogen certification. These are all things that are important and that should be important to you. So how do we render these things? How is it that someone gets into the industry? Well, when entering the industry, we do it through an apprenticeship. An apprenticeship is usually done when you start to take on a relationship with a seasoned mentor, someone who's been doing it for several years and has established themselves in the industry. Generally, this is an owner. When you come in, you'll want to show off a body of your work, have examples of you being able to handle the foundations of artwork such as light and shadow, composition, form, 1-point, 2-point, 3-point perspective, color theory and the color wheel so that you understand your primaries, your secondaries, your tertiaries, etc. You should have an understanding of light and shadow, even to the extremes such as chiaroscuro, which is an Italian term meaning the extreme contrast between light and dark. These are things that you want in your background when you walk into a shop. From there, I don't want to say that you necessarily become a bitch, but let's just say you're going to be doing a lot of side work. You're going to be helping people out in that shop. You're going to be scrubbing some tubes. You'll be cleaning floors. You'll probably be cleaning some bathrooms. But are these things that the other people in the shop are simply to sit back and watch you do? No, it shouldn't be. It should be something that is shared. Things that are going to help you to develop yourself as an artist and develop a relationship that's positive with the shop that you work in. You'll end up doing a lot of tracing. You're going to end up doing a lot of drawing, and after that you're going to do some more drawing, and then you're going to do some more drawing. And when you go to sleep at night, you're going to think about drawing. Eventually, you'll be introduced to the skin. Your mentor will take you through the process of starting to learn, most likely on pig skin when you begin. And then from there, you'll start to be introduced to the general public, and most likely it'll start out with friends and those people that you know well before you move on to becoming a full-fledged artist. Apprenticeships are difficult, but they should be taken very seriously. And if you want to become an apprentice, you should decide that that's something that you're going to devote your life to. This isn't a hobby. It's not like taking up scrapbooking on the side. It's something you've decided, you know what, I want to be a tattoo artist, I'm going to devote my life to this. In the industry, we live tattoo. We live the artwork every day. We don't consider doing anything else. We chose this as our career path, and we don't think about changing careers somewhere down the way. If we want something else, we do it on the side. So folks, that's tattooing. We've had a brief history of the tattoo, the American industry, and the American cultural relevance of the tattoo. In closing, I'd like to leave you with a quote that is on the back of one of our Art on You Studios t-shirts. If I've but one life, allow me to live it tattooed. I'd like to thank you all for coming out this evening while we talk ink.